AITA for refusing to speak to my brother's fiancée after revealing her parenting methods. Last weekend, everything changed for me. It all started when I was asked to babysit my 6-year-old nephew, Dylan. My brother Tom and his fiancée Melissa had made plans for dinner, and I was happy to help out, thinking it would be just another typical night with the little guy. But what happened that evening completely shook me to my core and turned my family upside down. Dylan was playing with his toys when, as kids do, he accidentally knocked over a glass figurine on the shelf. He immediately froze, his eyes wide with panic, and then, to my surprise, he burst into tears. As he cried, he muttered, "Please don't tell my mom. She'll give me the quiet time." I didn't know what quiet time was, so I gently asked him. Through his sobs, Dylan explained that whenever he misbehaves or does something wrong, Melissa makes him kneel in front of a wall for an hour. If he moves, speaks, or cries, the punishment extends. If he even says one word, he's in for even longer. I was stunned. I tried to remain calm for him and told him that accidents happen, but inside, I was already thinking that this didn't sound like a healthy form of discipline. When Tom and Melissa returned from their dinner, I pulled my brother aside and shared what Dylan had told me. I was expecting him to be concerned, maybe even a little shocked, but instead, he defended Melissa. "You don't understand parenting," he said, dismissing my concern. "Dylan is just being dramatic. It's just a timeout. You're overreacting." I couldn't believe my ears. I wasn't overreacting. What Dylan had described wasn't discipline. It sounded more like punishment for being a child. I felt conflicted. Was I wrong for thinking that this was something worth addressing, or was my brother simply not seeing the problem because he was too close to the situation? After all, Melissa was his fiancée, and he wanted everything to appear perfect, especially with the wedding coming up. Later that night, I found myself alone, wrestling with my thoughts. I couldn't let it go. I needed to say something to make sure Dylan wasn't suffering in silence. I couldn't stand by and pretend everything was fine when I believed what Melissa was doing was harmful. So I took the next step. The next day, I called Melissa and told her I needed to talk. She agreed, but the conversation that followed was nothing like I expected. I calmly expressed my concern, telling her that making a 6-year-old kneel in silence for extended periods of time didn't seem like appropriate discipline. I said I was worried it could be emotionally damaging for Dylan. To my shock, she absolutely flipped out. She accused me of having no right to question her parenting, because I didn't have children myself. She claimed I was twisting Dylan's words and trying to sabotage their relationship. Her reaction was extreme and defensive. The conversation left me feeling uneasy, but I stood my ground. I couldn't ignore what I felt was wrong, even if it meant causing tension. The following days were a whirlwind. Tom was furious that I had gone behind his back to confront Melissa, and now, not only was he defending her, but demanding that I apologize to her before the wedding. I didn't know what to do. Part of me felt I should apologize just to avoid the drama, but another part of me couldn't back down. This wasn't just about a disagreement over parenting styles. It was about what I believed was in Dylan's best interest. I wasn't about to apologize for trying to protect him, especially when I genuinely believed that Melissa's quiet time was more harmful than helpful. What followed was a division within my family. My parents sided with Tom and Melissa, saying I was overstepping and needed to apologize. My sister, on the other hand, agreed with me, but she stayed quiet to avoid causing any more conflict. Tom became more distant, and Melissa made it clear that she didn't want me anywhere near their wedding. My heart ached, not just for the damage this was causing to my relationship with my brother, but for Dylan, who was caught in the middle of it all. I tried to keep things civil for the sake of family, but every time I thought about Dylan being subjected to that quiet time punishment, I couldn't help but feel that I had made the right decision, even if it cost me my relationship with my brother. I've never felt more alone than I did during those weeks, but I couldn't bring myself to apologize for standing up for what I thought was right. And as the wedding drew closer, I had to decide whether I was willing to lose my brother over this, or whether I was ready to accept that sometimes doing the right thing means losing something you love. As the days passed, I found myself in an emotional turmoil, torn between the love I had for my family and my growing concern for Dylan. The whole situation felt like a constant tug-of-war inside me. I had always been close to my brother, Tom. We were a tight-knit family growing up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that by questioning Melissa, I was jeopardizing something precious, my relationship with him. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore what I had witnessed. I'd spent a lot of time with Dylan over the years, and he was always a sweet, energetic kid, but something felt off when I saw the anxiety in his eyes that night, when he broke the figurine. His reaction, immediately going into panic mode, begging me not to tell his mom, was telling. It was like he already knew the consequences of his actions. He was terrified, and that broke my heart. No child should be that afraid of their own mother. I had hoped, once I spoke to Tom, he'd realize there was something deeply wrong with the way Melissa was treating Dylan. I figured he might take a step back, consider my point of view, and maybe even approach her about it. But instead, he just brushed it off. That hurt more than I expected. It wasn't just his defense of Melissa's methods, but the way he dismissed my feelings entirely. When he said I didn't understand parenting, it stung. I didn't have kids of my own, sure, but that didn't mean I lacked empathy, or the ability to recognize that what Dylan was going through wasn't right. He was a little boy, and it felt like Tom was choosing to prioritize his fiancée over his nephew, and even me. I didn't know what to do. I spent the next few days trying to process everything, but it only got harder. Tom's reaction kept replaying in my mind. How could he not see that Melissa's punishment was far too harsh? I knew I had to do something. I wasn't going to just let this go. But what was the next step? How far should I go? I finally decided to reach out to my sister. She'd always been the person I could turn to for advice, someone who could see things clearly when I felt lost. I hadn't told her the full extent of what happened, but I knew she'd understand. We were close enough that I could speak openly without fear of judgment. Over coffee one morning, I shared everything, what Dylan had told me, what Tom had said, and how Melissa had reacted. I laid it all out, waiting for her opinion. She listened intently, her face growing more concerned as I spoke. Once I finished, she sighed deeply. "I agree with you," she said quietly. "What she's doing is not okay, and I'm really sorry you're going through this." I felt a sense of relief in hearing her say that. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting, but then she added something that made me pause. "You know Tom, right? He's not going to change his mind. He's always been a bit blind when it comes to the people he cares about, and right now, he's blinded by love for Melissa. He's not going to see it until it's too late." That hit me hard. I knew my brother better than anyone. He'd always been fiercely loyal, sometimes to a fault. But this wasn't just about loyalty to Melissa. It was about him ignoring what was best for Dylan, and that made me so angry. "I don't know what to do," I confessed. "I can't just let it go, but I don't want to lose him." "You shouldn't have to choose between your family and doing the right thing," my sister said softly. "But at some point, you have to ask yourself, is this something you're willing to live with? If you stay quiet and ignore it, you'll be complicit. If you speak up and fight for Dylan, you might lose them both." Her words lingered in my mind long after we parted ways. The guilt was already starting to eat at me. Would I really lose Tom over this? Was I willing to lose my brother, the person I had always looked up to, just to protect a child who wasn't even mine? The thought of it was unbearable, but deep down, I knew I couldn't live with myself if I didn't at least try to make things right for Dylan. I knew there was no going back now. The seed of doubt had already been planted in my mind, and I had to follow through. So I called Melissa. I wasn't sure what I was going to say exactly, but I had to make her understand. I couldn't stay silent about it anymore. When she answered, there was an immediate tension in her voice. She must have known why I was calling. She didn't let me speak for long before she cut me off. "I told you before that you don't have the right to question my parenting," she said, her voice cold. "This is not your business, and if you don't drop it, we're going to have a serious problem." I took a deep breath. "Melissa, I'm not trying to attack you, but this isn't just about you or me. It's about Dylan. He's scared, and I'm worried that this form of discipline could really harm him. I can't just ignore it." For a moment, there was silence on the other end of the line, and then, as if she'd been holding her breath, she let out a sharp laugh. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You think I'm abusing him? You don't have kids? What do you know about discipline?" "I know that making a child kneel in silence for an hour is not discipline. It's punishment, and it's wrong," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can't just stand by and let this go on without saying something." There was a long pause before she responded, her voice filled with venom. "You're trying to destroy everything, aren't you? You want to tear this family apart, don't you?" "I'm trying to protect him," I said, my heart pounding, "and I'm not the one tearing anything apart. If you can't see that this is a problem, then maybe I'm the one who has to step away from this." After that conversation with Melissa, I felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. I had done what I felt was right, but at the same time, I knew that things would never be the same again. It's one thing to call out a friend or someone you're not emotionally invested in, but this was family. Melissa wasn't just my brother's fiancée. She was about to be a permanent part of my life, and potentially Dylan's mother figure. And now, I had crossed a line that I wasn't sure I could come back from. The days that followed were incredibly tense. Tom didn't speak to me for a while, after I confronted Melissa, which only deepened my anxiety. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, wondering if maybe I'd been too harsh. Had I overstepped? Was I really right about her punishment, or was I just being dramatic? But then, every time I thought about Dylan and how terrified he was when the figurine broke, I felt certain I had done the right thing. But the guilt kept nagging at me. It wasn't just Melissa who was angry. It was my entire family. My parents, who had always been on my side, told me I was overreacting and that I needed to apologize. They claimed I didn't know what it was like to be a parent, and maybe I didn't. But that didn't mean I couldn't recognize a problem when I saw one. I tried to avoid Tom as much as possible, giving him space to cool off, hoping he would come around. But he didn't. Instead, he became more distant, and the few interactions we had were awkward and filled with tension. It was clear to me that he wasn't going to change his stance on Melissa's discipline. He kept insisting it was a form of punishment that she had every right to use, and that Dylan was just being overly sensitive. He even told me I was making a bigger deal out of it than it was. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, but I could tell he wasn't ready to hear it. Every time I tried to speak to him about it, he shut me down, saying I didn't understand parenting and that I shouldn't get involved in their family dynamics. But how could I not get involved? I loved my nephew. I was watching him grow up, and I couldn't stand by and let him suffer in silence, all because no one else seemed to see what was happening. I found myself more and more isolated, not just from Tom, but from the rest of my family as well. They all seemed to be siding with him, telling me that I was causing unnecessary drama. It was like I was the villain in my own family, the one who had upset everything by speaking the truth. I felt so alone. My sister, the one person I thought would understand, had become distant too. She had told me she agreed with me initially, but after talking to Tom, she started backing away from me. It was clear she didn't want to get caught in the middle of this mess, and I couldn't blame her. The worst part was that I could see the damage it was doing to Tom and Melissa's relationship. Tom was trying to keep the peace, but it was obvious that the tension between him and Melissa was only growing. Every time I saw them together, I could sense the undercurrent of hostility, but neither of them would address it. Instead, they acted as though everything was fine, but it wasn't. I couldn't unsee the cracks forming, and every time I was around them, I felt like I was just watching it all crumble. A week later, Melissa invited me to coffee to talk things out. I had no idea what to expect. Part of me wanted to avoid her entirely, but I knew this conversation was inevitable. I agreed to meet her, even though my gut was telling me it would only make things worse. When we met, the tension was palpable. She didn't waste any time getting straight to the point. "You've caused enough damage already," she said, her voice cold but controlled. "You're not welcome in our lives if you're going to keep meddling." I stayed calm, despite the storm raging inside me. "I'm not trying to meddle. I'm trying to protect Dylan," I said, my voice firm. "What you're doing to him isn't right. It's abusive." She narrowed her eyes. "You don't know anything about discipline," she spat. "You have no idea what it's like to raise a child." "I do know," I countered, my heart pounding. "And I know that what you're doing is hurting him. Making him kneel for hours in silence is not discipline, it's punishment." "Maybe you should mind your own business," she hissed, leaning forward. "I'm not going to let you ruin my relationship with Tom or my family just because you're jealous or don't agree with how I raise my son." I was taken aback by her words. "Jealous? Of what?" "I'm not jealous of you, Melissa. I'm worried about Dylan. He's just a little boy. He doesn't deserve to be treated like this." Her face flushed with anger. "I don't need your approval, and I don't need you to tell me how to parent. If you keep pushing this, you'll regret it." I didn't know how to respond to that. I had already been pushed to the brink, and it was clear that nothing I said would make a difference. She was never going to admit she was wrong, but I couldn't walk away without saying something important. "I love my brother, and I care about Dylan, but if this continues, I won't be a part of your life," I said, my voice steady but emotional. "I'll do whatever it takes to make sure that boy is safe, even if it means losing you all." There was a long, heavy silence. Melissa didn't reply. She just stood up abruptly, grabbing her things and storming off. I sat there for a few moments, my heart aching. I wasn't sure if I had made the right choice, but I knew I couldn't back down now. After my confrontation with Melissa, I knew things would only get worse. I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and now there was no going back. But I also knew that I couldn't stand by and pretend like everything was fine. I had made my feelings clear to her, but I had yet to speak to Tom directly about what had happened. It wasn't easy, though. The last time we talked, he had dismissed my concerns and sided with Melissa, defending her quiet time punishment. I knew that having another conversation with him would be difficult, but I felt like I had no choice. The first time I saw Tom after our heated exchange, he barely looked at me. The tension between us was suffocating. It was as if he was avoiding acknowledging me, and I didn't blame him. I was the one who had challenged his fiancée's methods, and I knew it had put him in an impossible position. But I couldn't back down, not when I knew that Dylan was suffering. "Tom," I said quietly as I caught him in the kitchen one evening, "we need to talk." He didn't respond at first. He just kept stirring his coffee, his back to me. I waited, but he didn't say anything, so I pressed on. "I need you to understand something," I began, my voice shaky but determined. "I didn't say anything to hurt you. I did it because I care about Dylan. What Melissa's doing to him, it's not okay. It's not normal discipline. It's abuse." That got his attention. He slowly turned around to face me, his face hard and unreadable. "You're making a big mistake," he said in a low voice. "You've got no idea what it's like to raise a kid, and yet you're acting like you know everything. This is my life, my family. I don't need you coming in here and making things worse. Tom, I know you're trying to protect her, but you're not seeing the full picture," I said, taking a step forward. "What's happening to Dylan is not healthy. I can't just sit back and pretend I don't see it." He was silent for a moment, his jaw tightening. "I don't want to talk about this anymore," he finally said, his voice strained. "You don't understand what it's like, and I'm not going to keep defending you to her. If you can't accept Melissa and the way she's raising Dylan, maybe you should stay out of our lives." I felt my heart drop. It was like a punch to the stomach. For a moment, I thought I might cry, but I held it in. I wasn't going to let him see how much it hurt. This wasn't about me. It was about Dylan. "I'm sorry, Tom," I said softly, looking him in the eye. "But I can't turn a blind eye to what's happening. If you can't see it, I can't help you." Tom didn't say anything more. He just turned away from me and walked out of the room. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space he left behind. I felt like I had failed. I had tried to reach him, tried to make him see that I wasn't trying to tear their relationship apart. I was just trying to protect Dylan, but he couldn't hear me. Over the next few days, I tried to reach out to my parents for support, but they were no help either. They told me that I was overreacting and that I needed to apologize to Melissa. They said I was making things worse and that I was destroying the family. It felt like no one was on my side. My sister, who had initially agreed with me, started to distance herself too. She didn't want to get involved, and I couldn't blame her, but it hurt to feel so alone in this fight. Then, one evening, I received a call from Tom. He wanted to meet. I was hesitant at first, but I agreed. Maybe this was the moment we could finally talk things through. I just didn't know what was going to happen next. When we met, it wasn't like the heated confrontations we had before. This time, Tom was calm, too calm. He didn't seem angry, just resigned. It was almost like he had already given up on trying to fix anything. "I've been thinking about everything you said," he started, his voice low, "and I don't know what to think anymore. I love Melissa, but I don't want to lose my family either." My heart sank as I listened to him. It was clear that the tension between him and Melissa was taking a toll on him. He didn't know where to turn or who to trust. He was torn between the woman he loved and the family he had always known. "I don't want you to lose your family, Tom," I said gently, "but I can't stand by and let this continue. I'm not trying to tear you apart. I just want you to see what's happening." Tom looked at me for a long time before he spoke again. "I don't know if I can fix this, but I'll try. I need some time to figure this out." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to reach out and hug him, tell him it would be okay, but I knew that nothing was going to be okay until Dylan was safe, and I wasn't sure if Tom would ever fully understand that. "I'm here for you, Tom, but you have to understand. This is about Dylan. He deserves better than this." Tom nodded slowly, then stood up to leave. "I know. I'll figure it out." I watched him walk away, knowing that things were still far from resolved, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like there was hope that Tom might finally see what was happening and do something about it. The days that followed were some of the hardest in my life. After Tom and I had our conversation, things weren't magically fixed. He'd seemed to be trying, but it felt like he was still deeply conflicted. I kept thinking about Dylan and how scared he must be, knowing that his life was still under the control of someone who saw him as nothing more than a tool for her discipline. It was heartbreaking. I had to keep pushing, even when it felt like no one else understood. Melissa, of course, was furious with me. That much was obvious. Every time I saw her, she shot me icy glares, and the tension between us was palpable. I tried to remain calm, but I couldn't stop myself from feeling angry. How could she treat a child like that and not even acknowledge how wrong it was? How could she keep putting him through something that seemed more like punishment than discipline? One afternoon, I decided to take action. It had been weeks since my confrontation with Melissa, and nothing had changed. Tom hadn't spoken to me since our last conversation, and I was still stuck in this limbo. I was frustrated, but most of all, I was scared. Scared for Dylan, scared for Tom, and scared for the future of our family. I knew that talking to Tom again wouldn't be easy, but I couldn't keep quiet any longer, so I called him. "Tom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk. This can't keep going on. I need to make you understand just how dangerous this is for Dylan." Tom was silent for a long moment, and I thought he was going to hang up on me, but then he spoke. "Okay, fine. I'll come over," he said. There was a note of exhaustion in his voice, but I wasn't sure if it was from the situation or just the weight of everything. When he arrived, we didn't waste any time. I led him into the living room and sat him down. "Tom, listen to me," I started, my heart racing. "Dylan is a little boy. He's 6. He shouldn't be punished like this, kneeling against a wall for hours. That's not discipline. That's abuse. I don't care what Melissa says. This isn't normal, and it's not healthy for him." Tom looked away, his hands clenched into fists. "I don't know what you want me to do, okay? She's my fiancée. I love her. I don't want to lose her. But if you're right, I don't know how to fix this." I could feel the weight of his words. This wasn't just about Dylan anymore. This was about Tom facing the possibility that everything he believed in, his love for Melissa, his faith in her parenting, might have been wrong. "You don't have to lose her, Tom," I said gently, trying to keep my voice calm. "But you can't ignore what's happening to Dylan. He's a child, not a punching bag. He doesn't deserve this." There was a long pause before Tom finally spoke. "I don't know what to do," he admitted quietly. "I love her, but I don't want to hurt Dylan. I'm stuck. I don't want to let anyone down." His vulnerability was hard to ignore, but I had to stay strong. "Tom, if you don't stand up for Dylan, if you don't protect him, no one else will. You have to make a choice. Is your loyalty to Melissa worth more than the well-being of your nephew?" Tom looked at me, his eyes tired but filled with a mix of regret and confusion. "I don't know if I can change her. I don't know if she'll ever listen." "You have to try," I said firmly. "You owe it to Dylan. You owe it to yourself." At that moment, I could see the conflict in his eyes. It wasn't just about Melissa anymore. It was about being a good brother, a good person, and doing what was right for the child who had no voice in this situation. "I'll talk to her," Tom finally said, his voice steadying. "But if she won't listen, if this keeps happening, I don't know what I'll do." I nodded. "I know this isn't easy, but you need to make sure Dylan is safe. That's all that matters right now." The days following my conversation with Tom were tense. I waited, hoping for some sign that he was starting to understand the gravity of the situation, but nothing came immediately. He seemed more distant than ever, and Melissa, well, she avoided me like the plague. Every time I saw her, she shot me cold looks, and I knew she was still furious about my confrontation with her. I had no doubt she was also whispering to Tom, telling him I was overreacting, or that I didn't understand parenting. The rift between us was growing, and it seemed like the tension was only escalating. Then, one afternoon, Tom called me. "I talked to her," he said, his voice tight. "She didn't take it well. She said I was being manipulated by you, that you were twisting things, but I kept pushing. I told her it wasn't right, that we had to change things for Dylan." A small spark of hope lit up inside me, but I had to keep my emotions in check. "What did she say?" "She didn't exactly agree, but she promised she'd try to be more understanding. She said she'd try to change the way she handles discipline. She even said she'd read some books on parenting, but I don't know if I believe her. I'm not sure if she'll really change." I sighed in relief, but I knew this wasn't over. "That's a start. It's not much, but it's something. Keep your eyes open, Tom. If she doesn't follow through, don't let Dylan suffer because of her stubbornness." "I will. I'm not sure what will happen, but I don't want to keep fighting. I just want this to be over." I knew this wasn't the end. It couldn't be. Melissa might promise change, but people don't change that easily, especially when they're defensive and unwilling to admit they're wrong. But for now, it was all I could hope for. Small progress, baby steps. The next few weeks were a blur. Tom and I exchanged a few more awkward conversations about Dylan's situation, and I kept an eye on things from afar. I didn't want to push too hard, but I also couldn't stop myself from worrying about what was really happening behind closed doors. I wasn't sure if Melissa had truly changed, or if she was just playing a part to keep Tom from seeing her for who she really was. Then one day, out of the blue, Tom called me again. "I think I've made a decision," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of regret and clarity. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. I know it's not perfect, and I don't know what the future holds, but I'm starting to see that what you said wasn't wrong. Dylan deserves better. He deserves more than what she's been doing." My heart pounded in my chest. "Tom, are you saying—" "I'm saying," he cut me off, "that I'm not going to marry her, not unless she truly changes. I can't stand by and let her treat Dylan that way. I can't be part of a family where a child's well-being is ignored for the sake of pride or discipline. I can't." I was stunned into silence. I had no idea Tom would actually make that choice. It wasn't easy for him, I knew that, but it was the right thing to do. "I'm proud of you, Tom," I finally said, my voice thick with emotion. "You did the right thing. I know this wasn't easy, but Dylan needs a safe home, and you just gave him that. I hope I made the right choice, but this is on me now. I have to make sure Dylan's okay. That's all that matters." And just like that, the story came full circle. What began as a heartbreaking situation ended with a brother standing up for what was right, even if it meant losing something he thought he wanted. Sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that protect the most vulnerable. Tom chose to put Dylan's well-being first, and in doing so, he gave his nephew the chance to grow up in a safe, loving environment. It wasn't just about one child's safety. It was about standing up for what's right, in a world that doesn't always make it easy to do so. It's a reminder that when we see something wrong, even if we risk losing it all, we have to speak up, because at the end of the day, family isn't just about being there. It's about protecting each other no matter what. So, if you've ever faced a similar choice, ask yourself, would you stand up for what's right, even if it meant walking away from something you thought you wanted? Because sometimes, the right choice is the hardest one to make, but it's always the one that will matter most in the end. Thanks for following this journey. If you're facing a tough situation like this one, remember that you don't have to go through it alone. Share your thoughts and advice in the comments. Let's keep the conversation going. Stay strong, stay kind, and always choose what's best for the ones you love.